and that new society abolishes the old conditions of production. In doing so, it then abolishes the conditions that led to that antagonism in the first place. In doing so, it'll then abolish the necessity for that class identity to begin with.
What?
I mean, think about it this way. If you went to high school...
That was a lot of abolishing just then, wasn't it?
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Well, it comes around full circle. It's the synthesis of knowing and acting retarded, and then the opposite of that is you become retarded, and then the synthesis is now you don't know that you made yourself retarded. There's a difference between not knowing that you're retarded and not knowing that you made yourself retarded.
And struggles that are created by historical conditions.
He goes right back into cult speak. Every time he'll read what James Lindsay says, and I understand what James Lindsay is saying, every time he goes, all Marx is saying, I just hear demon speak whenever he starts going into fucking conditions. I just hear, whenever he's fucking talking.
Is that one of them books with the screens? Like, I don't know why I did a southern accent there, but...
Yeah, wait, better than trying to do a black accent, Patrick, so you played it very good there.
Hold on, give me a second.
Okay.
Is this one of those books with the screens? That was an impersonation of an Uncle Tom. Okay.
This video right now.
All right, let's give her a go. Welcome, comrades! I'm RD, short for rhetorically defective. Sorry, I had something in my throat.
Yeah, probably a dick.
Welcome, comrades! I'm RD, short for rhetorically defective, here with my forever fallopian friend-zoned co-host, Patrick, and we are Done With It, a podcast that's dedicated to the sea of communists that just don't get enough attention. Feel free to subscribe to our YouTube to see a video of the podcast, link in the description. How you doing, Patrick?
I'm okay. I mean, I think the main problem with being fallopian friend-zoned is going after girls that have boyfriends when I don't mean to. That's probably the main issue.
But
there.
being the other man's so fun.
No, it's not. It breaks my heart.
And the genius thing when you're the other man, it's like there's no way she'd ever do this to me. Yeah.
True.
So, let's talk about someone that's in an actual healthy relationship, okay? And it's the owner of Wisecrack on YouTube. Now, you may not believe this, but this guy's a communist, okay? And they have like, what do they have? 3 million subscribers? And would you believe it if he didn't build the channel to 3 million subscribers? Isn't that wild? Somebody else did all the work, and then he took it over and made it commie. Can you believe that? I love
this. This is like when Ben Dixon was talking about democratizing the Young Turks and just like commies performing their own little proletarian revolution to overthrow Cenk and Anna and then just take on the Young Turks' name. So, more of the same. That sounds about right.
So this guy's particularly frustrating because he is commie brain with very shit-lib delivery. A lot of other commies that we've covered are commie brain, commie delivery. He's just very sassy and backhanded and downplaying any negative thing, any negative attribution to Marx or communism that's ever fucking happened. The amount of sweeping that happens drives me crazy because he just seems like a nice... He just says things in this tone the whole time and, oh, Marx is so scary. Yeah. Meanwhile, that's Christian nationalism. James Lindsay is helping Christian nationalism. Oh, but he's talking about Marx and I talk about Marx like this.
Isn't it funny when you listen to them talk? They'll talk about Lindsay. Like he says that Lindsay's backed by a Christian nationalist. He's referring to Michael O'Fallon, who runs Sovereign Nations. All of the Christian nationalists hate Michael O'Fallon and they just spend their time online harassing him. But yes, James Lindsay and Michael O'Fallon are Christian nationalists. It makes complete sense.
So this video is called Peterson and Lindsay Is Marx the Devil? Now, as we all know, only leftists have the freedom to be expressive and flowery with language, okay?
Correct.
So with James Lindsay, I wouldn't be on the path that I've been on with being able to spot communists without James Lindsay. There's plenty of things I disagree with James Lindsay on. I don't agree with James Lindsay on everything. I personally completely disagree with his synopsis of the woke right. But the man has awoken a lot of people, because something usually feels wrong when you're talking to leftists. You're like, what? Why does this person feel so evil? What is it? I can't quite put my finger on it. As if I disagree 1 degree, it seems like they want to rip my head off. And James Lindsay has done an unbelievable job going into great detail, explaining this how communism has evolved over time and how it's been in the past and how it's manifested now. Personally, I'm not very intellectual, in case people can't tell how I speak. So I like more so to take a lot of the intellectualization that I've heard, and that's the whole point of this podcast, and apply it to the behaviors I'm seeing. Because if you just explain to someone theory, it can be very easy to check out. When you show a behavior, it's like, oh, okay, I kind of get what you're saying, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you about Lindsay. There's things that I disagree with him about, Peter Thiel and other people that I would, if you want to talk about woke right, I would classify Thiel and these other guys as more woke right, as some stupid anon sharing spicy memes on Twitter.
Right.
That's sort of my main issue. But yeah, no, I completely agree with you though. Without Lindsay basically doing his podcast on Hegel, and especially about what queer theory is and how it's used to queer and alter children's consciousness, we'd be all running around screaming in the dark, not really understanding what's happening. So
yeah, now we're running around screaming in the light, knowing what's happening, and we look psychotic.
Yeah, that's true. That might be worse. I don't know.
Here we go.
Breaking news. A Democratic presidential
intro.
candidate, Kamala Harris, is a radical Marxist communist speaking in satanic code language to destroy America from the inside out.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
I love it because these are the people that will call Trump a Nazi, you a Nazi, me a Nazi, anyone a fascist, anyone a Nazi. But then if you allude to the fact that her father was a Marxist and then draw a parallel there, that's completely ridiculous, completely downplayed. Oh, I guess she's a communist. These people would be fucking balls deep in your asshole and go, oh, I guess my balls are inside you. As long as you just say anything with that voice, it's so petulant and childish.
I know, in the you were saying before about how Lindsay sort of highlighted the evolution of communist thought. These people pretend as if that never happened. That never happened. Communism died with USSR, and none of that is actually in existence. Whenever I tell them that Pete Buttigieg's dad translated Antonio Gramsci's, I think it was his prison diaries.
Mm-hmm.
And he's whenever I tell them that, they're like, well, that doesn't mean anything. When I tell them that Tim Waltz used to hand out, pamphlets, Mao's Little Red Book for gifts, oh, that doesn't mean anything. But then if they tell
what about how
me
Barack Obama praised Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals, and included it as reading in schools?
Yeah, but then, right? You could have all that in your back pocket, right? That doesn't mean that they're at least communist sympathetic. But then if there's a report that Donald Trump read a book of Hitler speeches, that definitively proves that Donald Trump is a Nazi.
Dude, what did the communists...
The other stuff doesn't.
I want to do more research into this. What did the communists do before the Nazis? Before communists could exploit the dead bodies of burnt Jews, what were they doing? Because now they call you a Nazi and a fascist. What were they doing before the Holocaust? Communists love the Holocaust. Oh my God, it's all they talk about. What were they doing before that rhetorically?
They really do. It's for the communists, especially in the West, the World War II and the Holocaust is really it's more of a founding story than the founding of America is. The founding of America they talk about because it was founded, with white Christian men in mind, and black people didn't have as equal rights. So they talk about that. But in terms of how Hitler killed all these communists and everything, World War II is really they love it. They love it.
I need to do research as to what they were clinging to before that, because that's their cash cow now.
I think it was. I think at that point it was just
probably fascism with Mussolini.
Yeah, and farmers and people who own apartment complexes, right? It was more just class based. But then with the rise of Hitler, Aryan supremacy, et cetera, they're like, okay, the new big bad is white supremacy because, Christians spread out everywhere.
And not Christians. And communists killed the Nazis, right? They were on the good side, and it's a story of how we liberals allied with the communists to kill the Nazis, is how it's painted. Which, there's a modicum of truth to that, but the communists were also shaking hands with the Nazis, but that's for a later date.
Yep.
Or at least according to one math PhD turned conspiratorial Reddit philosopher, James Lindsay.
Me.
Here's James Lindsay on a recent podcast.
She is a communist. She knows her Marxist literature in and out. Her father was a Marxist. She was raised as a red diaper baby. All of her catchphrases, like you didn't just fall out of a coconut tree, that's a Marxist. It's not specifically, it didn't come out of Karl Marx, but it's a Marxist sentiment.
Later on, he said this.
So the woman's a communist. I don't think she's a very high-level communist. Like I said, I think she's a low-level functionary in the Communist Party.
And on what I'm pretty sure is a weird Norwegian alt-right podcast, he kept it up.
But I think that she...
Do you see how he doesn't even know? I'm pretty sure that's an alt-right podcast, but whatever.
Yeah.
That's what a woman fucking sounds like and what a woman does.
And Lindsay, known friend to the alt-right. It's not like he's openly waging war against what he calls the woke right now. But yeah, Lindsay's just spending all this time on alt-right podcasts talking with white nationalists.
A third of regular conservatives are weary of him because of the woke right stuff and how it's getting intermingled with some tenets of conservatism. He's very independent, I would say. He's very not left, very not right, but we're all more right than we are left because of how far left leftists have tried to push the Overton window. You're considered on the right if you like private property.
There's two things about this douchebag who does this video, okay? He's wearing a Mos Def shirt. This is definitely a white man that started listening to rap music based purely on identitarian reasons, and he will like the shittiest rapper as long as they're heralded in the black community. Doesn't matter how bad they are. And the other thing is because he's a leftist, he's a communist, he never actually spends that much time listening to right-wing thinkers, talkers. His assessment of the issues on the right are so superficial. It's terrible.
Well, they have to be wrong.
Yeah, but at least there's some commies, mostly the American Communist Party, the ACP, and tanky commies that can actually describe what's going on the right. These kinds of guys, like MSNBC commies, although he'll say that he hates MSNBC,
right.
These guys have a completely their analysis of the political landscape is so terrible because just the fact that you're
people
saying
creating a veneer for malicious communism
is absurd.
They're creating a veneer for it, like how Joy Reid, R.I.P. Joy Reid, by the way, she's dead. She died in a plane crash. I'm just kidding. Her show's canceled.
Joy Reid gets fired during Black History Month.
I didn't even realize that, dude. Have you noticed things have been way less blackety black than they used to be?
What do you mean?
We used to hear about racism in the past 5 years all the time. Black people used to insert themselves. Woke blacks used to insert themselves into the airwaves. We would hear during Black History Month so much black men being killed in the street. Apparently cops don't kill black people anymore. What happened? It's like they're getting away from the identity and now they're focusing back on class.
Yeah, and they're still, and you have all the woke people out there still screaming to the high heavens. They're still trying to, but I agree with you. It is moving towards
people are losing their jobs. They're getting laid off. It's this is not it. It was.
I think the Democrats and the left, the people in charge, are hoping that essentially these identity categories that they sort of have been using over the last 10, 15 years, well, longer than that. I think they're hoping that these identity categories are cemented. And since a lot of them are on the lower side of the socioeconomic status, I think they're hoping that they could just not address the identity stuff directly and just incorporate them into a more class-based analysis.
I think they're plateauing with the amount of people that they can put onto identity. They're okay, whoever's going to be an identitarian is pretty much that at this point. We're going backwards at this point. We're starting to get our asses kicked, so we've done as much indoctrination in this cultural avenue as we possibly can. Now we're going to act like we've only ever talked about class. Now that the people believe these are their true identities.
And think about trans people are more likely to be poor, they're more likely to be mentally ill.
Cluster B.
On average, there's more black people in poverty, per capita or whatever, than white people. So it's all right, guys, just stop talking about your skin color and how you want to cut your dick off and just join us in the class-based revolution now that we have you. That's what they want.
No, they scrambled everyone's brains.
Yeah, which is hilarious though, because to these identitarian people, they're going to talk about class, but they have to frame it in an identity lens, which the Democrats aren't going to like going forward.
Yeah, that's what my next video is about, which should be released today, but let's go.
Sweet.
She says so many things that are kind of textbook Marxist.
And on one occasion, he also added in some misogyny just to mix things up a bit.
And I think she's hiding Marxism in kind of this
So
ditzy,
smug.
giggly,
Yeah.
you know, act that she portrays.
Now, this all caught my attention when he put out a viral Twitter thread explaining how Harris is speaking satanic Marxist incantations during campaign events.
As I said on Twitter the other day and got mocked relentlessly by the media for this, I said it's a Marxist incantation, as a matter of fact. It's like a spell. So you can see the possibility of a world that's unburdened from its own history, which is exactly what Mao Zedong did when he launched the campaign of Smash the Four Olds.
And not to be outdone, Jordan Peterson has already picked up the baton, also promoting the weird Harris-Marx-Satan conspiracy.
We're born into a world where other people have used their creative potential to transform the world into their vision. So, in a sense, our
The burden of what has been.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And do a little hand gesture.
So today, I want to start by reacting to Lindsay's recent Satanist manifesto, and we'll then see how this conspiracy theorizing, in the guise of philosophizing, gets picked up by Jordan Peterson. But before I dive in, some background for those of you blissfully unaware of who this man is and what he does. Now, Lindsay is a mathematics PhD and former massage therapist / swordsman. That's all real, by the way. He rose to fame during what's called the Grievance Affair, where he and 2 other failed academics submitted fake papers using postmodern jargon to a series of academic journals to expose the lack of quality and rigor in academic publishing. They largely focused on journals publishing feminist and
So
Failed
like
academics.
right. So everything has to have a biased slant to it. He has to discredit them immediately. But he did that. But I would love to hear, like, did he not do that?
Yeah, and the other 2 people that were instrumental in the grievance affairs were Peter Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose, and I think Peter Boghossian just resigned from a university in Portland, I believe.
Portland,
And,
dude. He was knee deep in it.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, so he saw it everywhere. And Helen Pluckrose went through something similar. But like, I love that though. So this guy is a communist, right? And so he views mainstream society as a sort of like bourgeois, like upholding of like the status quo.
Mhm.
But then when the status quo rejects someone for their heterodox thought, like Lindsay, Boghossian, and Pluckrose, then he takes that as a sign that means they should not be trusted, even though this is a man that would claim that like mainstream society in and of itself hates people and hates communists. So like there's no honor, there's no integrity, there's no logical like through line of thought.
Right. It's the same cognitive dissonance that on one hand, a landlord is exploitive and oppressive or bourgeoisie, okay? But the mass pharmaceutical industry that made the vaccine isn't bourgeoisie at all.
The gene therapy. I'm gonna call it the gene therapy
Sure.
going forward. Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait till I get like super AIDS in 10 years. But yeah, no, it's funny because like these are the kind of people that don't understand. Well, they claim to. They claim to understand that all these different industries, the military industrial complex, pharmaceutical industries, the media, they claim to know that these industries work together. And yet when they like issue decrees about trusting the science surrounding the gene therapy, they're like, oh yeah, totally, dude. I just got my 8th booster. Like they don't apply.
Yeah, that's helping us. Well, that's not exploitative at all. No, that's to help us.
Their questioning of these industries only goes so far. Like they trust them.
There's a signal that's sent down somewhere.
I've been calling it the signal for about 5 years.
It's like they have antennas.
Yeah, legit, dude. No, it's like they've already been hooked up to the Borg and they're just getting software updates. It's absurd.
And queer scholarship. He's written books criticizing both critical theory and race Marxism. He teaches weekend seminars on communism and runs a website that's funded by a Christian nationalist. He's also been accused of promoting conspiracy theories like cultural Marxism, which has long been associated with anti-Semitism, and LGBT.
Wait, cultural Marxism is anti-Semitism. I missed that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, like back in the 30s and 40s, I think they were talking about cultural Marxism and its links to like different Jewish intellectuals, and there's a bunch of Jewish intellectuals that are like sort of responsible for a lot of it being created. But it's really frustrating though, because like he'll say, oh, it's anti-Semitic, but then you can't talk about the people that are pushing it. Now, if you want to talk about the people that are pushing it and say it's because they're Jews and that they want to destroy humanity, well, then you're getting into the anti-Semitic region. But just the fact, just him saying that means like you can't look at it. You can't look at it all. If you believe in it at all, it's anti-Semitic, even if you're not claiming that they are doing it because they're Jewish. He's so dishonest. And the other thing, he said that Lindsay's backed by a Christian nationalist. It's Michael O'Fallon, who runs Sovereign Nations, who's basically like a Zionist and a dispensationalist. The Christian nationalists hate Michael O'Fallon. They hate him, and yet he calls him a Christian. All Michael O'Fallon talks about is the constitutional republic and how we must have a separation of church and state. He's the opposite of a Christian nationalist. They hate him, and yet this man claims that he's a Christian nationalist. So fake and gay. So fake and gay.
Grooming conspiracies. I did a video a few years back looking at his conspiratorial reading of critical race theory. Once this one's over, you can check it out if you still have life left in your eyes and your soul. And just to be sure for the first time, my name's Michael. Before I was a YouTube guy, I was a philosophy professor, and a philosopher named Dave, who's a baseball fan and a gambling addict, helped me with this one just to make sure we did.
See, so everything has to be ironic, so you never know when he's joking or serious. That is one of the most annoying deliveries of communist thought, and it shows because a lot of Marxists, Western Marxists, where it's like trendy, they don't know anything. Most Marxists haven't read Marx. They just listen to this guy and they go, yeah, I just feel right. I just feel like I'm correct.
Yeah, and a lot of them don't even they haven't read it, and they don't even realize that they're communists. Like, you talk to them and you try to explain what's underneath it, and they don't even know. Well, sometimes you run into some of them that do know, but a lot of them just don't know. It's hilarious.
Didn't miss anything. So let's dive in and see why Kamala Harris is a Marxist and Marx is a Satanist, and by proxy, Kamala Harris is also a Satanist, I think, or something. Guys, I'm just so tired. Before we get into it, I want to talk about this video sponsor, Babbel. For a lot of people, the link in the description, you're gonna get 60.
You know how your parents would say that, like, don't sit close to the TV, you're going to ruin your eyes, or don't make a face, it's going to stay that way? A lot of leftists have acted retarded for so long that they're stuck being retarded now.
They really are.
He thinks he's smart acting retarded, like he doesn't know what someone's saying. When you act like you don't know what someone's saying, you come off as, like, very retarded, especially when there's, like, a really simple through line to what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and once again, I don't know. Do I chalk that up to ignorance, or is he like purposely misconstruing? Probably both.
Well, it comes around full circle. It's the synthesis of knowing and acting retarded, and then the opposite of that is you become retarded, and then the synthesis is now you don't know that you made yourself retarded. There's a difference between not knowing that you're retarded and not knowing that you made yourself retarded.
Yeah. It's true. It's very
off your subscription. So let me know in the comments, what language you want to learn from Babbel and where you're going to go to speak it. Again, click the link in the description. You're going to get 60% off your subscription. And now let's get back to the show. Okay, so we'll start by looking at Lindsay's recent viral Twitter thread. I will not call it X. Now he says, let's talk about Kamala Harris saying to see what can be unburdened by what has been. This phrase, which she repeats all the time, is not mysterious, it's esoteric. That is, it's occult. It's a Marxist and Luciferian incantation, and that's easily seen. This guy really makes a lot of leaps real quick. Now, there was a video in his original tweet that got taken down, but here's a clip of what he's talking about to give you some context.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been.
The head nod kills me.
Unburdened by what has been. There are those who are unable to see what can be. But there are many more who are able to see what can be unburdened by what has been.
Now, what she's doing there might be corny or a cliche, maybe for fun, say.
But if Elon Musk holds his heart and thanks everybody, it's 100% a Nazi salute, which I love that so much. Did you see Steve Bannon did a salute?
Yeah, I'm starting to get annoyed by all of it, but yeah.
I need everyone to understand the level of antagonization that they've been putting upon us for the past 5 years, it just feels good that whether or not they're actually Sig Heiling, to do it and then call them crazy, it just feels so good. Because I love calling them crazy when they're being like, look, he's obviously doing it. And then the right pulls up these like other examples of AOC doing it. It's not nearly as clean or as Elon or Steve Bannon doing it. But this is about antagonization and fucking with their reality back, from my perspective.
I know. I'm thinking of it from like a normie lens. Like I just like keep the like Steve Bannon should have like a alt with a Pepe the Frog profile on Twitter, and he could just do that shit on Twitter. The other thing is, what was I gonna say? Oh, it's funny because if you listen to Bannon afterwards, he basically talks about how we must protect Israel. Israel has a right to exist, and the main threat to Israel, this is not my opinion, it's Bannon's. The main threat to Israel are progressive Jews in high positions of power, which isn't exactly a Nazi position.
Not even
like
close.
If you're like a Nick Fuentes, like Nazi light, I guess, or like, you know, these other kind of like white nationalist type of identitarian characters, you hate the state of Israel. You really don't.
Steve Bannon is a Zionist, and he believes that there's good Jews, as opposed to people that believe there's no good Jews.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I mean, he's trolling. It's silly. He's trolling, but to call him a Nazi when he explicitly states
it's perfect.
Like,
calling him a Nazi when he's a Zionist, yes, awesome.
Yeah.
To see what can be unburdened by what has been 10 times in a row and see how you feel. But I don't hear anything that's Marxist or Luciferian about this. I studied Marx for a while. Well, have you really like given the audience anything else he said? I'm not exaggerating. James Lindsay has written and spoken over 1 million words on this topic, without exaggeration.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Probably millions.
And he's like, oh, really? And he just pulls up this fucking tweet and goes, really? Where's your explanation, James?
And it's and this I think he gets into it here. There's another video he does. I think we might be talking about that video next. But his analysis of Marx it's like I guarantee this guy's an atheist, so he views it through like this atheistic lens. And he has no idea about the religious zealotry of his own beliefs as well as Marx.
Well, they don't call it religious. They replace it with political, so it's like, oh, that's the wrong word. That's how childish it is.
The way this asshole talks about dialectical materialism and how it's just a objective study of the material conditions of history, he talks about that in the same way as a trans activist talks about how they're actually just affirming this empirical fact that is gender. Like even though it's built into the ideology that gender is completely subjective, the way he talks about dialectical materialism in this non-religious atheistic sense is exactly what the Troons do. And I can't wait till he does it later. It's hilarious.
Wait, is it in the right-wing video?
I think it's in the right-wing video. I think he might do it a little bit here.
We should get scooting then. Here we go.
Yeah.
I used to teach courses on Marx, and I'm not yet hearing anything that makes that
You've
connection,
given nothing.
But you know, he's just getting started, and I'm sure that James Lindsay, PhD, is going to be able to convince us. So he goes on.
I'm sorry. This is I'll speed it up after this. Just the way he talks, he's like, oh yeah, I'm so mad that my wife is spending time with Contravious Control Brown in the other room, and he's breaking her back right now with his prowess that I'll never have. That really bothers me so much. You know, no matter what he's talking about, it's so annoying how this is effective, where he's acting like he's presenting this argument fairly, but he just talks about it like this the entire time, and that's somehow effective to people. Bothers the fucking hell out of me that they can't see it.
Yeah, it's because I think like these kinds of guys, he's trying to like pull in normies and stuff, like with this sort of like exoteric veneer of being just like a common sense type of progressive.
Yes.
But underneath it is just, underneath like spiritually, this man may as well have a gaping wound where his dick used to be and have blue hair and a septum piercing. Spiritually, he's the same.
And says what esoteric means here is that it has a hidden meaning. It looks and sounds like goofy nonsense, but it isn't. People who know. That is, it's coded and Gnostic in its formulation, and the principle she's articulating is ultimately Luciferian / Hermetic, a la Marx. This guy loves words almost as much as he loves big swords.
He loves words. Okay, we'll see. When he starts talking about Marx, we'll see who loves words.
Read more Marx than most. I'm not seeing what he's putting down here. Maybe it could help us better understand.
Are you trying to see?
Catch up with all the words that he uses with a quick vocab lesson.
Coming from a Marxist.
Esoteric, which he says here, describes something that's only properly understood by.
So watch. So right now, we're going to be doing dictionary definitions. This is important to remember right now. So for right now, we're going to be doing dictionary definitions. Okay? He's not going to be explaining what James Lindsay is saying in the context in which James Lindsay is saying it. Later on, his defense for his own retarded ideology is going to go, well, we don't mean it in the dictionary definition. So the dictionary only applies to their opponents, but then they get freedom and use of language to describe their shitty ideology.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a communist, Gnostic, whatever, you want to control the language. You want to control the language and essentially apply different definitions to pre-existing words, because if you control the language, you basically control everything. You control everybody's minds.
But that's the Gnosticism. Only you can do that. Others cannot do that.
And yes, and it's imperative, if you want to control the language, you have to remove the context in which the language was originally used, so you can use it for your own purposes.
But what I'm saying is others aren't allowed to do that. I'm sorry. Your opposition is not allowed to do that. Only you are allowed to do that.
Well, yeah, the opposition has the wrong consciousness.
Right.
Folks with a specialized
You mean folks?
set of knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
Gnosticism, now it's a type of mystical religious belief that prioritizes like personal religious knowledge over divine revelation you get via someone like a Jesus. Luciferian, obviously, we get, Satanist beliefs there. And the Hermetic tradition is just another quasi-mystical belief system.
Wow. What a great breakdown. What a great breakdown. What an asshole.
Just words. Wow, words.
Hey, you learned something today. Look at you. Now,
yeah, you learned.
If we're gonna be as good faith as possible here,
yeah, right, dude.
That sure, some of Marx's writings are esoteric if you don't have a background in philosophy or economics,
proper
and
consciousness
like that. I don't know if Harris's line is very esoteric in that way. Like if you need specialized knowledge to understand what she's saying. But Marxism and Marx are definitely not Gnostic, Luciferian, or Hermetic, because all of those things directly oppose historical materialism, which is the theory that all of history is the product of material relations. It rejects idealism. It rejects, spiritual.
It rejects idealism. See, it's about reality. Listen to his fucking word salad right now. After saying that James Lindsay saying like a sentence or two is like fucking wordy, and like saying a bunch of bullshit in there. Like, no, we can't be idealistic because we just say the word material and then that makes it material. Yeah, that's fucking alchemy. That doesn't make it material.
It's frustrating too because like there is mystery built into our existence, right? The second that we woke up, the second we were born, we came into a world that we don't truly understand how we got here. So there is mystery built into the world. So to suggest that historical materialism is an objective way in terms of viewing history and how society is progressing is a religious claim. That's what these fucking retards don't understand, because they're atheist. Well, they think they're atheists. And they don't understand that. They don't. There's no like.
When me and you say we're being objective, we implicitly understand with each other that we're making the best faith attempt we can at being objective. These people believe they have the godlike omnipotence to view things objectively.
Yes, and that's what happens every time that there's a cult and people don't understand that they're in a cult and it's a new cult. They just think that they understand the correct way to actually view reality without realizing their own subjective nature in how they view reality, which is funny because if they actually followed the like postmodern sort of like queer theory laced ideology responsible for the new left's movement, they would understand that the ideology openly admits this. So if you admit this, then at that point, you're essentially manipulating reality for your own purposes while knowing that reality is subjective in a lot of different ways. And yet they act as if it's not because they're liars.
Wow. Nice ideology there, Patrick. I'm going to go here living in material reality, okay?
I'll be right back. I'm going to hang myself.
Explanations. So it's very hard to tie a lot of what he's saying to Marxism. And thus far, I can't really connect the Marxism stuff to the Harris stuff. But hey, I'm filming this before her main speech at the Democratic National Convention. So if she comes out as a Marxist Satanist during that, we'll put that footage right here.
Last year, Joe and I brought together Democrats.
Because any conservative or Republican always comes out as a white nationalist publicly, right? But that doesn't stop them from calling them a Nazi and a white nationalist.
Correct.
And conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades. The Border Patrol endorsed it.
Okay, I'm going to assume that never happened. But you know, Lindsay goes on and does something that I actually appreciate, and I'm being honest here. I'm not being facetious. He quotes the text of the thinker he's discussing and criticizing, namely Marx. And he has a lengthy passage from the Communist Manifesto here. He says, here he is at the punchline of the Communist Manifesto, explaining that when the proletariat organizes itself and executes a revolution, it can move forward into what can be communism unburdened by class antagonisms. So one thing to note as well is he's like inserting Harris's thing on top of some Marx stuff right here.
I love how he doesn't understand synthesis all of a sudden. I love how he doesn't understand combining two different things to fuse it together to show people the reality that it's manifesting. All of a sudden, that's out of his fucking brain when James Lindsay is doing it.
I know, and yet, when a conservative-minded person will say something, he understands the esoteric subtext of what is like
dog whistle.
The
They're dog
what's
whistling.
under there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
To sort of force the connection between the two.
Yeah.
I don't really see it. And if you want, you can pause or just go to his thread and read this whole passage. Now, the punchline thing is weird. Marx isn't a very funny guy. But here's what he's getting at in this passage.
You can't
he's saying that
you can't be funny.
The working class, which is formed by its antagonism with the ruling class, is able to create a new society, and that new society abolishes the old conditions of production. In doing so, it then abolishes the conditions that led to that antagonism in the first place. In doing so, it'll then abolish the necessity for that class identity to begin with.
What?
I mean, think about it this way. If you went to high school...
That was a lot of abolishing just then, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I love this idea that in his mind, the working class is inherently juxtaposed in like a sort of a conflict theory laden dialectical worldview.
Well, that's objective.
Against the ruling class or the property owners, as if you can't start out working class and then build yourself up to become that and then help other people build themselves up, as if you can't work within that ecosystem. No, it has to be all conflict theory.
His entire objective analysis is from Marx, who was never a worker, by the way, talking about how he viewed society in fucking 1848. Things are a lot different now, and it's an archaic set of beliefs. Now they might respond with like, well, what about the Constitution and how that was 1776 and whatnot. They're not telling you how the economic system should work for the rest of our lives. They're talking about concepts and morality and the reasons why.
Yeah, no, it's the morality. Now you could say the Constitution is flawed because of the Enlightenment, blah 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 blah. But they're literally just commenting on like sort of like a general nature of human nature, whereas Marx is specifically commenting on certain conditions that still exist but largely went away. I mean, that's why they went into culture.
If you debate a fucking Marxist, they always bring up widgets and factories. It's like, you're retarded to talk about the modern worker in the context of a fucking factory. Maybe in China, maybe in communist dengist capitalist China, but not in the fucking United States or the Western world.
Yeah.
In a bad 80s movie, maybe everyone in your class is either a skater or a surfer, land versus sea, and that's your fundamental antagonism. But then maybe eventually all the surfers are like, oh, sharks are scary, so they start skating, and then everyone in your class, they're just skaters now. So there's no more antagonism, and there's not even a need for the identity of skater, because you're all just skaters now, and when everyone is a skater.
That was such cult speak.
there's no longer going to be the need for identities. Yeah, so let's just undo all of the contradictions of reality and render humanity into a vaguely sort of like whitish, tannish paste.
He tries to view everything as a contradiction to the point where he abuses the words contradiction and agitation. Or antagonism. He's abusing these words because everything has to fit in that paradigm. You want to know what makes you a skater? Nothing to do with being in the water. There could be no water and you would be a skateboarder.
It is amazing how, like, I think there's like truths of the world, but it is amazing how like reality sort of shifts depending on like your like worldview.
Yes.
Like it's
That's
truly
the perspective
amazing
of a human being and how the human brain works.
Yes, and yet this man claims to believe that he has the correct worldview, which is definitely
from
not
a guy
claim. Yeah.
From 1848 that never worked a fucking day in his life. That guy knows.
I know.
No one is a skater? Something like that? Let me know if you're, in high school, what the current cliques
I'm dumb,
and
ironic
antagonisms
guy.
are
Got some
in your
furries.
school. As Marx writes in the passage quoted by Lindsay here, in the place of the old bourgeois society, we shall have an association in which the free development of each is the condition of the free development of all. So just sort of saying right there, like, yeah, we're going to create a new world, but it's one that's not antagonistic, in which freedom is just something that like everyone can have, which sounds scary and bad. But none of this happens through evil magic or esoteric incantations. It's all the outcome of dialectical and historical processes in which one set of historical conditions and economic conditions paves the way for another, which is ideally more human.
Ideally more human. So this is just the conditions that people are in. People are in different conditions throughout history. They are not all similar conditions, the same conditions.
Yeah, exactly.
But in order for their simplistic worldview to make sense, it's just, these are just the conditions, which is always about oh my god, my brain resists doing it because it's baby speak, where the material conditions of people is their access to resources and somebody else has that's just such a gross oversimplification, but how does it make people more human? I'm wondering what that even means.
Well, I mean, he's taken the Marxian lens on this, so what essentially
they want to create a world where you're more human. That's a fucking cult, buddy. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Well, he claims that what did he claim? That basically humans were like sort of estranged from their true nature as a social being because of the creation of like the free market and like businesses.
Oh, so everyone's born into a reality that's a prison? So you mean like kind of hermetic?
Yeah. That's the funny thing is like when looked at through that lens, all this guy does in all of his critiques and trying to dispel what Lindsay is saying just reinforces them. If you actually understand what he's saying,
of course he doesn't. It's hermetic. Oh yeah, I'm the demon guy. That's great defense,
so
dude.
Cringe.
Great fucking
So
defense.
And at this point, what we have is a not great reading of Marx and a not convincing connection of Harris to Marx.
Gnostic.
Okay, so
Only
he keeps
he can
going.
do it.
He quotes some more Marx. And at this point in this thread, he's veering kind of away from the Harris stuff and just talking about Marx. So I want to focus on what he's doing there. It'll weave back around though. So Lindsay says, here's how Marx opens the Communist Manifesto: the history of all hitherto existing society. He puts in brackets what has been. That's not in the text. Is the history
He's connecting the
of
idea,
class struggle.
dipshit.
It's precisely what he says. A communist revolution would emancipate, unburden man from the punchline, though. Again, it doesn't make.
You're going to be retarded. You're going to be retarded forever.
On top of each other, but yeah, sure. The gist.
He doesn't understand that the punchline is the thing that James Lindsay finds ridiculous and doesn't agree with, to the point where it's comedic. He's like, punchline? This isn't comedy. What does he mean, punchline? You have to try to not understand.
Yes.
Which makes you retarded.
Yes, you have. Yes, correct. Like every time you talk to a gender cultist, they will always admit that gender affirming care is human experimentation. And of course it is. It's undeniable. It's an objective fact. And you tell this to them and show this to them, they'll either go, well, I don't really care, or they'll go, no, it doesn't make sense. Like they have to purposely try to misunderstand it, or they just don't care.
Which looks ridiculous to everybody, which is why like Jubilee, Piers Morgan, just having such great success with just letting these people speak to anyone that's willing to listen to them, and they sound ridiculous every time.
That's why I would love, like, I know you made a video about what you were like doing some work on, like Riley Gaines talking to that insane trans quote unquote woman, Blossom, and I would imagine if those kinds of conversations were had on ABC, CBS, and NBC. Like, gender affirming care would be removed from all of the states by popular demand within like a few months, like, because it just exposes it.
It's slowly rolling out right now.
Yeah.
That we get in the manifesto is this idea that the history of society is the history of class struggle. It's a struggle motivated by material and economic conditions, just meaning like peasants are only going to revolt when they don't have enough food to eat, our material conditions.
Okay, well, what if there's mostly not peasants anymore in a society? Oh, no, now I'm just going to call you a peasant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, he's got to if he wants to adopt this framework, he has to shove the modern world into the framework of something over like 150 years old.
Sounds like magical thinking to me.
A little bit.
Conditions motivate what we do societally. So that's, what he's saying. And James Lindsay just seems to be putting some of the Harris stuff in brackets on top of that. Now, here's how he explains it. He says, in other words,
I love how Marx is always just saying this simple thing. This guy is so Gnostic, it's unbelievable. He's like, no. Marx is just like, man, right? He's just like, whatever, dude. He's like, man, you should just have more, dude. Like, ooh, freedom is scary. Like, that's all Marx is saying, dude. Well, he really takes his fucking time saying that, doesn't he? If that's all Marx is actually saying.
Yeah, I know.
Marxism itself, in its own manifest declaration, identifies it as being able to move into what can be unburdened by what has been. I just want to note, he says in its own manifest declaration, but then he just says the Harris quote, but it's not in Marx at all. He says in socialist Marxist consciousness,
oh my God.
Is a
Marx didn't literally say it.
To see what can be unburdened by what has been straight communism. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, stuff like this is really hard for me because,
man, I don't even know.
This is a influential person. He writes books. He goes and does these big speaking events where he's introduced as an expert on critical theory and philosophy.
And it turns out I'm smarter than him, jerking off in my room alone all day.
How does this happen? Because I want to be a grifter like that. Because I understand Marx way better than this guy, and he probably makes more money than me. So
yeah, I know more than him. But
please let me know in the comments. But he's back at the word salad
this
bar.
This is good faith,
in these
by
passages.
The way.
Marx is not arguing for this what can be unburdened by what has been thing. He's not describing a Gnostic spiritual awakening. He's just saying that the contradictions and struggles that are created by historical conditions.
He goes right back into cult speak.
In order, right? I know, and like we hear it, and it's hilarious. But like in order,
every time, just really quick, every time he'll read what James Lindsay says, and I understand what James Lindsay is saying. Every time he goes, all Marx is saying, I just hear demon speak whenever he starts going into fucking conditions. I just hear, whenever he's fucking talking.
I know, and like it's entirely, and he actually, I don't know if he talks about it in this or before, but he talks about, like, so he poo-poos the idea that Marx was an occultist, because when we talk about Marx being an occultist, a lot of the times guys like James Lindsay will pull from early Marx writings. He's like, oh, well, Marx evolved past that. It's like, well, no, Marx had a like specifically like theological position, and then he couched it in this sort of, class-based, quote-unquote, material, like, veneer. But all of that madness is still underlying it. This entire guy's, like, personality is based around reading Marx and taking it at face value without understanding that there's something underneath it.
No subtext.
No subtext. Every political ideology comes from philosophy, and every philosophy comes from a theology. So even if you try to strip it of everything, basically everyone is making like religious claims for their prescriptions on how to help or destroy humanity. So it's all theological when you get down to it. And yet this guy pretends that it's not because he's an atheist and Marx was an atheist. It's a joke. He's a joke.
Lead to new conditions, lead to the overcoming of those struggles, right? History moves forward. And, this isn't a process that's just political, right? Technological and social transformations also come from the overcoming of, antagonisms, right? Because like contradiction between our desire to communicate.
Okay, let's see if we're using the word contradiction like how human beings use it right now. You ready? And not fucking occultists.
Yeah, I'm sure it won't.
Physical distance leads to, oh, hello, the phone.
The contradiction of wanting to talk to people and there's distance between them. Oh, hello, the phone. What was the contradiction between... That's not what a contradiction is. That's like fulfilling a need, maybe, as how a human being would fucking describe that. Everything has to be a contradiction. Everything has to have antagonism. And this is objective, by the way.
Yeah, no, everything is viewed through a dialectical lens. Every single thing in existence.
You know, the contradiction between our desire for fresh food and the way that stuff spoils leads to, hey, refrigeration.
Not a
there
contradiction.
You know, the contradiction between my desire to constantly argue with weird men about meaningless things and living with a wife and daughter, that contradiction has produced Reddit, thank God.
Not a contradiction.
In all of these cases,
not
we
a funny
see how
joke.
it's an existing tension, an existing contradiction, which leads to something new. It doesn't happen through magic, though. He goes and in here...
But he couldn't understand how James... he understands that, needing to talk to someone plus distance is contradiction, which equals phone. That makes sense to him. He can't understand how he's applying what Kamala Harris said to the works of Karl Marx. That's just fucking out of his pay grade, apparently.
Yeah, correct. Well, it's funny because he's looking at it he's basically looking at it through a dialectical material lens. So he's looking at making better the material conditions of society. And then when Lindsay does it, when he's actually operating in the realm of ideas, he can't even comprehend it because it's almost as if he doesn't believe that dialectical materialism is an idea. It just is. It almost exists outside of man's cognition, which makes no sense. Which is why I don't even believe there is such thing as a materialist. I think they're just an idealist who's pretending to be materialist.
That makes them that they're swapping out realist for materialist. That's them trying to call themselves realists while they're just ideologically possessed.
Yeah.
Here he starts quoting another one of Marx's texts. This is the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844. And here he really seems to, note the language Marx is using. He quotes him saying that communism overcomes private property as human self-estrangement through positive transcendence. He then says that the general theory or theology of Marxism is that, wait for it, man is unburdened by what has been, which is called his historical conditions, but can awaken to his true spiritual self, which is socialist, so that it can be transcended. He then does the Harris quote.
He's making fun of Lindsay here, but all Lindsay is literally
repeating back what this guy just said in different words.
Yes, exactly. And he's stripping away the sort of materialist lies underneath this guy's ideology and just exposing
Lindsay didn't do it right. He didn't use the right words.
Yeah, it's funny too because don't these people have a hard time understanding analogies? So it makes sense that this man wouldn't understand that Lindsay's literally just basically paraphrasing what he's been rambling on about for the last 16 minutes.
Look at the look in his face right now. His brain hurts trying.
Yeah.
Again, now I don't want to be unfair here.
Yeah, all right, dude.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Lindsay is quoting the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts. So this was never published in Marx's lifetime. It's a set of notes from his time in Paris. He's 25, 26 years old. He's out.
I love it. James Lindsay doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's done so much research. He's tracked down the notes that he was writing that were even published.
And we should ignore what Marx wrote when he was 25 or 26 because it wasn't published. And surely it has no bearing on Marx's other work that was published. Yes, let's just ignore that. It's literally like ignoring an origin story of someone to understand why they are the way they are later in life. They just ignore all
that's
that.
The level of research that James Lindsay has done.
Yeah.
But he's going to be like, hey, I thought he was smart over here. Even I know more than he does.
Oh, God, look at his face. This is a guy who works at a used bookstore who points you in the sociology department direction. This is who this man is.
Okay, well, we're going to try and fist fuck our way through this. So he also failed a right-wing philosophy class. That video is just going to become fucking repetitive. So this guy also failed a right-wing philosophy class. So now that we have an overview on how he interprets Marx when someone else is criticizing Marx, let's see how he does with a right-wing philosophy class.
Yes, and you also, like you said, right, it's called I Failed a Right-Wing Philosophy Class, but then as you watch the video, he shows the certificate, so he did not fail it. So I don't even know what
he knows
title.
what to say. He knows what they want to hear.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
To teach college courses on Marxism, and I just failed a quiz in an online class on Marxism, socialism, and communism. I have a PhD in philosophy and used to teach college courses on Marxism, and I just failed a quiz in an online class on Marxism, socialism, and communism at Hillsdale College. So either I've gotten dumber, or this course is pedagogically designed not to teach or inform, but to indoctrinate people into a very specific right-wing ideology. One which ultimately argues for a white Christian ethno-state.
Every time, it's white Christian. So see how he doesn't say racist, transphobic, and stuff like that. He just says white. His reactionary buzzword is white Christian nationalism, and that's more suitable for a mass audience, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Sort of indoctrination is happening all over the place. Today, I'm going to look at this specific class so we can get some insight into how educational content is being used as a propaganda machine. Many of the ideas presented in this course were inaccurate, misinformed, or willfully misleading, but the thing that I found most shocking were the parts that I kind of agreed with.
At its core, socialism represents a very humane ideal. It's a system that is driven not by a desire to brutalize people, but to give them a good life.
But then they do stuff like this and imply that Marxists invented being trans.
The first transgender operation was conducted around 1930 in Germany in an institute run by cultural Marxists there.
And listen, that'd honestly be cool, but I looked into the institute they're talking about.
See how he says that would be cool if it was true? We've already done the it's not happening, but it's cool if it is happening.
Yeah, and especially, and once again, like these people that are operating in these facilities and stuff, if you look into their life a little bit, they're all involved in various socialist causes, but then there's no like the institute itself doesn't say the Socialist Institute of Studying Sexology. So he's like, oh, surely they're not actual socialists and Marxists. No, they can't be.
It was notably attacked by the Nazis, where they burned all the books. You know, I don't know if you want to be on the same team as the Nazis. And the only connection I could find with Marx was that the Marxist writer Ernst Bloch once rented a room there. So there you go.
So
and this isn't a mistake. The contradictions and inconsistencies of the course gave me some shocking insight into how reactionary thinking works. And what's maybe more shocking is that, like I said before, the whole thing ends with a call.
That's true.
What?
This is true. It is reactionary thinking. Not that you're having a reaction, but you are being a counterinsurgent. You are fighting their revolution. Yes. It's also reactionary how he means it, and it is true.
Yes, and what's more reactionary than being born into a purportedly free market capitalist society and then reacting against that in order to subvert it, in order to create your own essentially fabricate your own new paradigm. What's more reactionary than that? But I love how everyone that goes against him is reactionary.
For white Christian nationalism.
And here you could look at, say, Federalist 2, where John Jay describes that you have a common people. They are rooted from a common ethnicity, use a common language, have the same religion.
Okay, so let me show you.
That's historically accurate.
6 lessons each with a final quiz, and you get a certificate if you complete everything, which I did. So now I'm a graduate.
He completed everything.
Now the first lesson is called The Journalist, Marx, and it opens with the question:
how does a society create and protect human flourishing?
Which they apply to Marx's theory of communism.
The claim that communism leads inexorably to human flourishing must be evaluated.
But soon after this, they make a claim that points to the specter that's haunting the whole course.
The dream itself, complete abolition of human self-interest, is completely at odds with human nature.
But see, the problem is they don't define human nature, which then means that they can't evaluate Marx's ideas.
Human beings are animals at the end of the day, okay? We're an evolved, more civilized animal, possibly the most evolved and most civilized. Human nature is self-interest. We've seen this. Okay, let me try and put it in a way he'll understand. There's been class conflict, okay? There's been people that are selfish, but outside of class conflict, there's just been conflict for resources. The Native Americans, for example, even tribes in Africa, are battling each other over resources that they want. His brain can't understand this because it's not in a fucking dialectical way.
Yeah, and right, the human nature is in like, well, you could say self-interest. You could say that it's like sin, right? So that's like the importance of Christianity.
Yes,
that's lacking in this context because
it civilizes a society.
Yeah, and it's you're not living for yourself; you're living for Christ. So it literally, like, if done correctly, real Christianity hasn't been tried yet. If done correctly, if done correctly, you could essentially like temper your animalistic, selfish impulses in order to live for someone else, thus live for Christ.
You mean like raping and killing? You mean like we probably shouldn't do those things, and we should? It's funny. This actually gets closer to a communist fucking society, Christianity. Isn't that funny? Where it's like, we shouldn't be fighting each other. We should be working with each other, and we're both serving the same God, and there's no reason for us to fight each other. And our law, you should be presumed innocent. That's how civil this society should be, and we should protect people. And like, yeah, that's why there's like Christian communes, but they're voluntary.
Which is hilarious, because what you're saying right now is what Marxists will take and be like, see, man, Jesus is just like a socialist, man. Like, whatever. Even
though they didn't read Marx at all to do it.
Right? And Jesus was literally like flipping over the tables of like tax collectors. Like, yeah, he's a commie. Jesus wants to use the government in order to tax humanity. Sure.
Against this definition. Again, a definition that doesn't exist. And my most
the definition doesn't exist.
I guess I would assume that their definition of human nature is some libertarian notion in which we're all private entities driven by our own self-interest. The course also teaches us that Marx and Engels' ideas were more vibes than they were facts.
They thought these are not simply our views or our passionately held beliefs, although they were, but these are scientific truths we're talking about.
Right.
So basically, when Marx does
scientific
philosophy and economics, it's just like emotions and opinions.
Yep.
But when these guys, the ones teaching the course, do it, well, then we're doing facts and logic. And when they do try...
Dude, do you have any idea how fucking pissed the left is that Ben Shapiro said facts don't care about your feelings? They always do this facts and logic thing now when they're trying to be ironic. Oh, that's been eating them for over a decade now.
Yeah,
but when they do it, it's all facts and logic. Like, you sound functionally fucking retarded when you talk like that.
Yeah, and they'll always go like, they'll show these studies of gender affirming care and the detransitioner and the desisting rates, and they'll show all this quote unquote science, and then they'll show Ben Shapiro saying that there is no such thing as a trans person, and they'll be like, oh, I thought the facts didn't care about your feelings. What about this science?
A more substantial critique, it honestly feels like a lazy misreading.
Marx's idea was freedom requires us to liberate ourselves from our own individuality and to see ourselves in terms of the larger community that we are part of. And that communal freedom, which is a kind of collective freedom, it requires what we would call today the abolition of private liberty.
Now here he's trying to be cute by rephrasing the abolition of private property as the abolition of private liberty. The implication...
they talk about abolishing all these things. You think it's fucking far-reaching to say the abolition of private liberty? You really think that's so fucking crazy to say?
Is that Marx wants us to give up our individual freedom and ourselves for communal freedom.
Yeah.
But as Marx himself writes in the German ideology, only in community with others has each individual the means of cultivating his gifts in all directions. Only in the community, therefore, is personal freedom possible.
Right. You can only be free in their community. That's abolishing private liberty, you fucking cocksucker. Yeah. It's said with different words.
That's the thing. Like, just go create your commune. I know you still have to slightly...
No, everyone has to do it. I need to make everyone do it.
Now, the reason that Marx can think about both freedom and dependence is because he is a dialectical thinker, which is something that this course never mentions.
Freedom means freedom from religion. We have to abolish religion itself in order for there to be true freedom.
Oh, here we go.
And that can only take place in terms of this radical transformation of the human condition in which we stop thinking ourselves as individuals and start thinking of ourselves as part of this other larger whole.
Now, I've talked about this a lot in the last couple of years, but Marx's critique of religion is really a critique of the underlying conditions of oppression and alienation that lead folks to seek hope in religion. This is the opiate of the
okay, so like, what does that have to do with like hating gay people? They had to force everything to be related to economics because you have to work to stay alive, and they have to invert the reality of the best way to do that. This is why with like heteronormative, the most normal thing is two people making a baby. Let's do the opposite of that. Before that, it was economics. You have to work to stay alive. So let's hijack working itself. And it's go ahead.
Well, I was just say the heteronormative thing is it's even worse because at least like the economic system's been set up. You could set up a different economic system. I'm not going to say it's going to work as well, but you can still do that. You can take a brain dead man and a brain dead woman and sexually stimulate them. I'm not saying you should do this because it sounds like rape, and then force them together. And then as long as their shit's okay inside, the baby is born. So it's like, it is the one concept that seems as if it is completely true and can be empirically proven. So they've decided to literally attack the one thing that we can know that is actually true. It's the craziest thing ever. I still think about I'm sorry, I obsess about it all the time. It just racks my brain. Continue.
It's supreme evil.
Yeah. This is stuff. Marx isn't saying that religion is bad. Marx is saying that the world is bad. The world is soulless, and it leads to
that
the
is
need
literally
for religion.
Gnosticism.
That's fucking hermetic.
The world is a material prison. It is a material prison. Humanity has become self-estranged from its source, and we must liberate ourselves from the prison in order to return to the source and become one, which is just like dialectical pantheism. But yeah, no, it's not Gnosticism. It's not any of that. It's just viewing conditions.
What's I guess a property of a cult would be viewing a portion of the world in totality in service of your ideology.
Yes, yeah, specifically taking like different types of truths, right? The marrying you with the lie, in order for a specific endpoint that you have in mind. Like their entire cult is just a cult of inductive reasoning and logic. They're
post hoc rationalization.
Backwards.
Oh, well, this is why it didn't work.
Yeah, they're just working backwards. Yeah.
And his vibe is like, guys, what if the world was just great and we didn't need that? What if the conditions of social and economic life were such?
Didn't he trash them for calling it vibes, by the way? And right now, he's like, yeah, his vibe is all like, hey, man, come on, man. He's just describing, like, this is how you know 60s hippies were communists. That's what he's describing right now.
I was just going to say, like, Mark, I'm just picturing Marx, like, at Woodstock right now, just, like, tripping balls. This is basically what he's saying here.
That you didn't have to go to church to feel good. You still go to church if you want, but you wouldn't have to. That's the idea here. Now, another thing I've talked about before is how Marx's thought is dialectical. And this describes when thoughts and concepts develop through internal or external contradictions. Thinking dialectically means that we don't just think about concepts or ideas like they're in a vacuum, isolated from everything else.
Yes, you do. That's the only way that you think of things. You still think of work, labor, as the proletariat, as if it was the same that it was in 1848. You actually look at everything like it's in a vacuum, but then you just say the word material, and it convinces your brain that you somehow did something different. It's self-alchemy.
No, it literally is. Yeah. He's just performing like alchemy on like his own.
This is what I'm saying.
Consciousness.
He doesn't know he's retarding himself.
No.
There's a difference between being retarded and not knowing it, and making yourself retarded and not knowing it. Huge difference. Small difference. That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Think about the relations between seemingly opposed concepts or ideas. And this makes thought way more active and makes concepts way more active because we're thinking about them in relationship to context, material conditions, historical conditions, things of that nature. But this course ignores the possibility that you could be both more dependent and more free. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you live in a country that makes you pay more in taxes, but then also gives you the freedom of healthcare as a human right.
So dependency can also equal freedom. So you pay taxes that looks like dependency and less free, but then you get something for it. Do you see how much he has to bastardize language and view it like it's in a vacuum in order for it to almost attempt to make sense for his brain? It's like, okay, well, there's also, like, you're viewing it in a vacuum. Well, there can be longer wait times when it's not privatized. A lot of people still come to the United States. People leave the United States to get medical work done, and people also come from other countries to the United States to get medical work done. Do you see how now I'm talking about it like it's not in a fucking vacuum?
Yeah, it literally depends on the type of medical condition. Like in Canada, there's longer wait times for more complex procedures. In America, you can get those complex procedures done in a quicker fashion. Yeah, no, it literally is dependent upon the culture in which you're existing in, and yet he does not
viewing it in a vacuum while retarding himself by not thinking he's viewing it in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you might feel less free in that you're paying more in taxes, but you are more free in so much as you are guaranteed healthcare. So this means that if you break your leg when you're skiing, well, you know that you're not going to have your life financially ruined because of medical bills. You have the freedom to go skiing, knowing that even if you screw your leg up, you'll be okay. That's why I never want to go skiing. It's just too high of a risk. You know that skiing is like
look at this everyman right now. See, I'm just like you guys go skiing
for recreational sport activities.
One time I went skiing one time and, went down the hill. I fell and crashed. It was hilarious. And, they got those lifts, right, where you just put the bar in front of you. Well, I'm afraid of heights, and I literally just feels like I'm going up in a death ride. So I spent an hour and 45 minutes climbing back up the mountain. My friends had no idea where I was. Anyways.
I once went snowboarding with my girlfriend, and we both got on the lift plenty of times just fine. There was one time where I went to go on the lift, and I fell down, and the leg of the lift caught my jacket and was dragging me off the mountain as I was screaming.
Oh my God, it's like my nightmare. Holy shit.
Skiing's too dangerous. Now, in the course notes, they write that because religion and the family had both been perverted by capitalism, Marx believed they needed to be eradicated to reach a true communist society.
Here we go.
They somehow interpret this stuff, especially the family part, from this passage.
Abolition of the family. Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communists. On what foundation is the present family, the bourgeois family, based? On capital, on private gain. The bourgeois family will vanish as a matter of course, and both will vanish with the vanishing of capital.
So a team of distinguished academics read that and they thought, yep, they think that the family absolutely should be abolished. But according to political scientist Heather Brown, Marx and Engels argued that the family in its bourgeois form, based primarily on the management and transfer of property, was in a state of dissolution. The material conditions that had led to this form of the family were disappearing among the proletarians because they had no property to give to their children.
That's not word salad at all whatsoever.
Well, I just love it because he's basically, I think he goes on to state, and he's basically stating here, Marx, so this is what he says. Marx didn't think the family was evil. He thinks that the system in which the family exists is evil. So we need to abolish this version of the family in order to abolish society, which just leads to abolishing the family. But he's all Marx.
You know what that sounds like? We don't think Jews are evil. We just want to destroy Israel.
Yeah.
It's just the system. It's not the people.
I just can't. He's like, he didn't hate the family. He just hated the family as it exists, and he wants to destroy it in order to create a different. Like what? How Ouroboros is that? It's insane.
And here it's basically saying that the family in bourgeois society really just amounted to a mechanism of wealth and property transfer. And in acting as if Marx wants to destroy the family out of some hatred of tradition or God, the professors teaching the course are distracting from the fact that Marx and Engels want to abolish the family as a means of wealth transfer, labor production, and the subjugation.
Why would this is what they do with Black Lives Matter. They say Black Lives Matter, and everyone's like, that's kind of fucked up. What about, well, we mean Black Lives Matter too, okay? It's like, everything's a post hoc rationalization. Here's what he really meant when he said kill the family.
Think about that. Because these assholes will say that there's no such thing as meritocracy, and they'll be, people give their friends jobs, people give their families jobs. And it's like, yeah, you have family, and you want to help your family out, and then you have friends, you want to help your friends out. And then if everybody does that, then you guys will all be better off. They'll just argue that the power becomes centralized. Like, these people literally don't believe in meritocracy because of that and because of like generational wealth. They want to
Sounds like they're viewing it in a vacuum where one thing went wrong, so we need to throw out the entire system.
Yeah, and they want to abolish generational wealth as if you should not benefit because of the hard work of your mother and father that loves you, and then they wanted to help you set you up in a better fashion, as if that's somehow an inherent evil.
Well, they're thinking of themselves. They're just thinking of their family and not all of humanity as their family.
Yeah, that's why. There's I think it's Mystery Grove or something. It's like that Mystery Grove book Twitter handle. He basically he has like a tweet that lives in infamy that's used forever, where he's basically like, never forget that communism is literally just the ideology of hideous, deformed freaks that hate you and are jealous of like your life or something like that. That's really what it is.
It's
like,
pure envy.
Yeah, like, I'm really sorry that your mom or your dad did not do as good of a job as they could do in order to help bolster your life. That's the chaos of life.
I don't see a rich person and get angry. I'm not like jealous of their life. I don't know.
No.
I don't. I'm not. I'm an atheist. I've never been a very envious person.
No, I mean, I don't feel that way either. You're almost kind of like, oh man, it'd be nice to be
influential.
In that position.
Yeah,
it'd be nice to be in that position because then I could help myself and I could like help others as well. Like, it's all dependent on
Doesn't
how
it
you
sound like you're
look
talking
at the
to a
world.
kindergartner when you like to untangle a fucking communist proposition?
Yes, it is, right? Because think about kindergarten. In kindergarten, you're dealing with like very like basic claims in order to simplify something to like, because like you have to start at like the most sort of like basic type of like root of the issue, so then you could build a good foundation, and then it can become more complex. These people have a complete misunderstanding of human nature and reality, and so you literally like, you're like, wait, hold on, let's talk about what a woman is. What is a woman? And then you could get into the more complex stuff. Like, you have to start at like the most basic claim.
In order to believe that trans women are women, you have to view women in a vacuum. That is the only way to have that position.
Subjugation of women. In effect here, they're talking about what the family was at this particular moment in time. And this is another instance of the chorus really failing to understand Marx's dialectical method, in which concepts are developed dynamically in light of existing social relationships. This leads them to miss the fact that Marx is not talking about the textbook or dictionary definition of family, but instead family as it...
Oh, he's not talking about the dictionary definition. But when it comes to interpreting the words of James Lindsay, let's whip out the old dictionary. I love it, dude.
Well, that's why they're so bad faith. They're the most bad faith people in existence because their entire ideology is based on cognitive dissonance.
Gnosticism, they know better. They're allowed to use all these tools and you're not allowed to use any of them.
Yeah, standpoint epistemology.
Yep.
Yeah.
Existed as a social category during the particular time period of the Industrial Revolution in Europe. And this failure, well, it plagues the entire course because they ignore the fact that via this method, things written in 1848 wouldn't uncritically apply to our situation in 2025. So again, if we're thinking dialectically, concepts, ideas, all of these things are related to historical, material, and economic conditions. Our historical, material, and economic conditions now are different than they were 200 years ago.
He's almost there.
He just said shit's different, essentially. So when he says these conditions, it's being viewed in a vacuum because it's only allowed to be viewed through this specific framework.
Yeah.
Like when they say conditions, my brain doesn't know what he's referring to every time they say conditions, and that's a fucking feature, not a bug.
Yeah, and I mean that's what the new Marxists knew. They understood the failings of the communist revolutions of the 20th century, and they moved into culture, they moved into identity, because these identity groups, because of like what gay people being persecuted or whatever, blah 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 blah, black people not being considered like fully human, they understood they can manipulate the different identity groups in order to essentially come about by the same means as the original Marxists. So, yeah.
Years ago. But the course doesn't seem to acknowledge that. Now, they end the Marx lesson with this.
Generally speaking, the doctrines have had the most appeal. to university students, college students, the comfortable, the well-off, those who really have the time to read and, of course, to process and then propagate these ideas on their own.
This comes after a big chunk of the video where they argue that Marx was wrong because the working class didn't agree with him. And when they talk about the working class, they seem to just mean like, you know, soot-faced mine workers who don't have time for reading books and stuff. But they're missing the point here, because for Marx, working class describes people who do not have access to capital and then exchange their labor for money. You know, people that go to do a job, and then when you do the job, you get money for the job that you do, right?
Nowadays, people have more access to capital than ever before in human history, and their analysis is in a vacuum and never takes that into account that the conditions have changed dramatically.
We have obese homeless people. That's all I'll say.
Right.
For example, most teachers, nurses, chefs, journalists, plumbers, and YouTubers are working class. Most people are working class. If you're watching...
I'm sorry, how do they not have access to capital? Oh, you never defined what capital is. Oh, he's using the word and he never fucking defined it. What the fuck's he mean by capital? None of them can start their own fucking business or anything? They can't get a computer and start creating content and do a 1099? What the fuck is he talking about? Oh my God, I'm so mad.
This is like when what Kathy Hochul, the New York governor, said that not only do black people not know how to use a computer, they don't even know what a computer is.
No, Patrick, it's wrong. She said, Kathy Hochul said, black kids in the Bronx don't know what the word computer is. Not that they don't know what a computer is. She literally said they don't know what the word computer is. So we're not even talking about hitting a computer with a rock and beating their chest of naked ape noises, what she thinks in her head. They don't even know what the concept, the word is. It's so much more beyond not knowing what a computer is. That killed me when I heard the word computer. You say the word computer around a black person and they're like, what the fuck is that?
Is that one of them books with the screens? Like, I don't know why I did a southern accent there, but
yeah, wait, better than trying to do a black accent, Patrick. So you played it very good there.
Hold on, give me a second. Okay. Is this one of those books with the screens? That was an impersonation of an Uncle Tom. Okay.
This video right now, you're probably working class. And if you're not, I would love to tell you about our Patreon community. There's a link to it in the description. It's a great way to support the channel. When you sign up, you're going to get videos early with no ads, access to our Discord community,
you can hear me just say the word conditions,
it's a great thing to do
antagonism, over and over and over again.
Consider that. It's a way that you can pay for your sins.
Contradiction.
And I'm really not sure why they're saying that it's bad that the people who agree with Marx are people who read his books. It's like saying, oh, only people who have actually eaten al pastor tacos think they're good, so they're bad. What? Doesn't make sense. And this implies that...
Classic communist maneuver is to say something that doesn't make sense that no one said and say it doesn't make sense and apply that to their interlocutor.
All they do is create an argument in their head and then argue against that argument when you never said the thing. And
100% of the time.
100%. That's all they do, and you can't like at that point, like you just have to tap out, because then you're having an argument.
All you can do is mock them.
Yes, you're having an argument with someone who is fabricated a position that you don't even hold. This is why the only solution is to shame them and just banish them to the corners of society into the shadows. See, it's the only solution.
First, people who actually engage with these ideas take them seriously and find them valuable. And second, that labor conditions are such that many working people don't even have time to read, which, I don't know, seems like a problem.
Many working people don't have time to read is viewing it in a fucking vacuum on steroids. Nothing's changed, huh?
Also, that's nonsense. If you talk to a working person, what do they say? Oh, yeah, I watched 3 football games on Sunday. I watched about 10 to 15 different
Let's ignore the visual medium that exists nowadays. It's just that they don't have time to read.
Yes, people are consuming information in a different way. It's not that they don't have time. If they had time, then they would understand that the Marxist way is the true way, apparently.
Now, I took the quiz at the end of this one, and it created a real dialectical tension between my desire to get an A and my desire to be correct. But for now, I want to...
You see how he ironically uses dialectical tension?
Yeah. He's so clever.
Up ahead to the final lesson.
Oh, it means
but
nothing
I don't
even to
want
him.
you to feel lost. So here's a quick summary of lessons 2 through 5. Lesson 2 teaches us that Lenin was bad. And since he read Marx, well, Marx was bad too. Lesson 3.
No, I'm pretty sure that Lenin, did he famously say that he was influenced by Marx and then have a massive dictatorship famine that happened? I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah, it's not as if there's millions and millions of people that identify as Marxist-Leninists. Yeah, that's not a thing. Freaking joke.
It's bad because he said, I'm applying Marxism to reality and it didn't work. Am I talking to a kindergartner? I might be.
3 teaches us that Stalin was bad, and since he read Marx, you guessed it, Marx was bad too. Lesson.
Well, I'm pretty sure Stalin was continuing with fucking Lenin's hideous society, specifically saying, yeah, we're going to try Marxism again and try to apply it to the country. I'm pretty sure he was saying that.
I know. Imagine drawing negative parallels to a ideology that is passed down from person to person and ends up committing untold amount of atrocities.
Over and over again, trying the same exact thing.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing to do. It's so weird.
He just can't understand it.
And 4 teaches us that gulags are bad and that some guys who built gulags read Marx, so Marx is bad too, but also there's an Austrian economy.
How is he being like, oh yeah, they said gulags are bad? Yeah, they are bad. What is the argument there? See how he just relies on the tone? Oh yeah, gulags are bad. Yeah, they are. What's your argument? I'm just saying it like this.
Arresting your ideological opposition because you're trying to destroy their
like Democrats in 2024.
Yes, their freedom of expression, and then enslaving them, and then trying to brainwash them, and then when you can't, you kill them. You can there's probably a steelman argument there to suggest that is bad. I would assume it's some
economist who donated his library to Hillsdale College. He said Marx is bad, but he's good. Lesson 5 teaches us that Mao was bad, and since Mao read Marx, Marx was bad too.
Like, this is in good faith, by the way, but like the Chinese flag is a Marxist flag. They're like an openly Marxist country.
Yep. Yeah, no, they saw the failures of the 20th century, like I was talking about before, and they realized that they needed
and then they introduced
system.
Global markets and said it was Chinese characteristics. And then now they're thriving.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Which brings us to lesson 6, which teaches us that public school teachers, corporate DEI consultants, and Bernie Sanders want to destroy Western civilization.
Well, it's incredible that they keep trying the same thing over and over again, just like Eastern communism was more so based on class conflict. This is more so based on identity conflict, and they keep trying this over and over again, and it keeps not working, except way less people got harmed because it was identity and not on the material reality of their class.
Correct. Yeah.
And make you do orgies.
What Marx really deep down wanted the most was the complete destruction of Western civilization.
If you've ever done an orgy, let us know in the comments. The logical leaps made here are pretty astonishing. You know, they're going from Marx to Lenin to Stalin to Mao to college professors, DEI.
Why is he acting like it's confusing to follow that, like, linear through line, by the way? It's literally in chronological historical fucking order.
Yeah, like, hey, man, that
bouncing around. What are you bouncing around you're bouncing around the alphabet from A to B to C to D to E.
Yeah, that guy over there, he beats his wife. How was he raised? Well, his dad beat him and his mother. How were they raised? Well, his you're bouncing
around. You're bouncing around over here.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying that guy beats his wife and he's bad because his father beat his wife because he's bad. Like, what are you saying? What are you saying?
Programs, trans people.
But what seemed to have happened is that all of the Marxians, they did not just wither away and die. They, in fact, fled to academia.
Yes.
And in academia, they continued to spread these ideas and refine these ideas.
Of course, academics don't spread Marxist ideas as a project of ideological warfare. And again, I used to be a philosophy professor who taught at a very left-leaning department. I taught courses on Marxism, and that's just not what we did. You know, the idea is to introduce students to text and ideas that are important and let them think about
my fucking God. No one teaches Marxism like that on the left.
He's a former philosophy professor that taught Marxism and now has dedicated his entire life to a YouTube channel spreading Marxist ideas. But he didn't do that at college.
We're just introducing them to ideas that are considered to be the objectively correct interpretation of history, and the only way to get what you want is not necessarily through voting, but it's through conflict and perpetual antagonization. That's all we're teaching them.
He's so evil.
Isn't he really fucking annoying, though? Because he acts so... like he comes off as a shitlib. He comes off as like a more educated Boston Brian, you know? Like, oh, hey, I'm fucking just a regular guy. Like, oh, Marxism. It's just ideas, man.
Yeah.
About them for themselves. You know, academics study these ideas because they're important to the history of political philosophy and relevant to contemporary crises. But this course is invested in constructing a conspiratorial narrative in which everything bad is somehow connected to Marx.
Critical theory becomes the dominant.
That's a vacuum. Everything bad is Marx. He didn't say that. You can't help but view everything in a vacuum. You took one thing and then you applied it in its totality. They are in depth describing why Marx is bad, which he's conveniently left out. But you think everything bad Marx. This is what they do with fucking Hassan Piker. Oh, so he can't have a house? They make themselves retarded. And then I don't even know if they realize it.
Speaking of making himself retarded, wait for this next part. What he says next is so bad faith, it's hard to comprehend.
Dominant political philosophy of the latter half of the 20th century.
And as you see in the final lesson, they're really drawing some very thin connections. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, critical theory refers to the work of those from the Frankfurt Institute of Social Research in pre-war Germany. Later, a bunch of these people moved to America. It's associated with thinkers like Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcuse. And the basic deal there is they were blending Marx's work with the work of Freud and other contemporary culture analysts. Okay, probably read.
Oh, they were fusing Marxism with culture and psychology and sociology?
I know.
Is that what they were doing?
He's honestly, if you just ignore his prescriptions, if you ignore the bad faith stuff he says after presenting this, you could be like, wow, this guy's really doing some good anti-communist work in order to spread in order to inform people on how this spread.
You want so communists are so wrong. You know how usually you clip someone out of context and it makes them look dumber? If we clipped him out of context, he would look intelligent and smart.
Yes.
That's how dumb they are. If I had a bad faith interpretation of him, he would seem like a good guy. That's how inverted everything is.
Honestly, what would be a good project is to do that.
Yeah, make him look reasonable.
Yeah, and create a video and then like basically like salute him at the end and like award him with our most ardent anti-communist and then share it with him to see if it like freaking triggers him. That'd be hilarious.
Some of the stuff. But to say that these theories being taught in university humanities classes made it the dominant political theory of the latter half of the 20th century is a bit rich. And like, this is the part that really blows my mind. There's no solid evidence that the ideas of the Frankfurt School critical theorist were the most important political theory of the latter half of the 20th century. Guys, the latter half of the 20th century is like Reagan and Thatcher. That's the vibe.
See, it's not the most important because we have to take something and expand it into totality, that it's everything Marx says is bad, and then they were the most influential.
Yeah, it's not as if this ideology spread, right? Came over from the Frankfurt Institute, settled at Columbia University, then spread to every other university, and is not only just presented as like, oh, this is one political theory. No, it's presented as like, this is like objectively true. These kids are radicalized. These people then have spread out through all of the institutions. And then basically when COVID happens, a freaking switch is flipped and all of a sudden nobody understands what a woman is. But yeah, no, there's no
nationwide protesting. You can't go to school or work, but you're allowed to fucking protest. All these things happening concurrently. And that's just Black Lives Matter, the movement, man. There's no organization there.
And not only that, but these protests also extend to other countries, not even centered in America. Global. A global revolution. But yeah, no, there's been no empirical evidence to suggest
I didn't even think of that, dude. That's such a good fucking point.
He's such a God, he's so dishonest.
The vibe was not Adorno and Horkheimer. If only. And the course only really focuses on some of the more sexuality-based theories from these writers, and they read it in a way that tries to convince you that post-war Marxism was all about gangbangs and sexual transgressions and stuff like that.
And it was Marcuse that argues for a white privileged elite, the white radicals, to unite in solidarity with what he called the wretched of the earth. And by that, he meant third world peoples of color. He meant women who were oppressed by patriarchy.
You had the entire sexual revolution of the 60s. The hippies
Woodstock.
were just a bunch of the hippies were just a bunch of
it's called the sexual revolution. I wonder why it was called a revolution.
Yeah, it entirely pushed by the new left. That's what he said is empirically false. It is demonstrably false.
System, and he advocated those who were oppressed by gender. He advocates polymorphous perversity to overthrow the old social mores.
It's not. I've read a lot of Marx, and I've never had sex. They then connect the dots between Marxism, critical theory, and American liberalism.
The most influential form of Marxism today, it's just what we call today liberalism.
And then they slowly bring it.
That is true. We call it liberalism because they co-opted it, because they do not create anything, they only co-opt things.
Correct. Yeah, parasitic in nature.
And the Christianity stuff.
It provides a sense of meaning and purpose to the children of the upper middle class and of the wealthy. But ultimately it falls hollow. There's no real transcendence there, because the very promise of Marxism is a thoroughly profane society, that you'll be free from all the repressive moral constraints. Well, what does that lead to in practice? It leads to thorough meaninglessness, or it is reduced to raw power.
Yep. And there's a point in lesson 6, I'm going to show it to you right now, that honestly had me thinking that maybe I was watching a course created by serious academics. I actually tried to get in touch with Kevin Slack, the professor who's talking right here, but he doesn't have an email address listed.
Oh, yeah. If you look up this guy, you'll definitely want to talk to him, right?
Yeah, no, he definitely does. What would he do? I mean, all he wants to do is just troll and harass him.
Yes,
all he wants to do.
Like Sam Cedar. This is what the left does. Oh, yeah. They're afraid to debate me. Like, you're a piece of shit that cannot understand in good faith what your opposition is saying.
Correct.
On his faculty profile, so I couldn't do it. Kevin, if you're watching, DM me or something.
Yeah, man.
The reason I think that Marxism is so appealing is because of the radical inequalities of wealth that are, to me, indisputable today. How is it that you can defend mere capitalism if it leads to the destruction of the family, because we open up a market for every form of degradation that helps to destroy the family?
But right after he acknowledges that Marxism is a legitimate response to the crises of capitalism, there's this hard pivot towards the founding fathers and their sort of veiled Christian nationalism.
People descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs.
Right? And it feels, once you get here, like this is where the whole thing has been leading, to have a truly free nation.
Now he's making a jump. He's just saying something that was objectively true all throughout human history. That's been most of human history.
Yeah. And he's also ignoring the fact that we've had reforms in terms of we have sort of become a more pluralistic society, which is, it's problematic. And then when you have a very pluralistic
sure, but that's
society,
through capitalism.
Yeah.
They were we need to grow and get over classifications of each other, and we need the best talent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's decrying the system that like a racist white guy is most likely at this point, even if he's racist, he's going to be doing business with some black guy who wants to install a fireplace in his house, specifically because the guy could give him money. So it literally allows people to participate.
The politest racism in human history nowadays in the Western world.
Yeah, the capitalist system literally allows people to do business with other people that they don't agree with ideologically, or if they don't like them ethnically or religiously or racially.
Currency is the intermediary for human behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you need people with the same ancestors, presumably European, speaking the same language, probably English, practicing the same religion, Christianity, probably Protestantism, along with similar.
I love that this is how the left tries to position Trump, and he's just winning over all these non-white areas of society. It's like, okay, guys, please keep viewing it as that they're not focused on values.
Correct.
Manners and customs, which I guess means they wear the same types of pants and eat the same sort of food.
Irony,
it all boils
humor.
down to, and I'm not exaggerating here, a white Christian ethno-state.
Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people.
They think that the basis of a nation is everyone has to be from the same place, speak the same language, and have the same religion. Oh, there's a place that's like that right now. Things aren't.
How does a country function if everyone doesn't speak the same language? How does a country function if nobody knows what each other is saying? We experience that. You experience that where you live, and I experience that where I live, where there's sometimes a person that you're trying to get a service or product, and they do not speak English very well. It really puts a wrench in the system, don't you think?
Yeah, it's also just absurd to think that we should be like a multicultural society where there's no dominant type of language. Like imagine going to like Japan or China, and every country like has like a assimilationist nature where you're supposed to assimilate into the dominant culture so you could participate in it. But they view this as, inherently xenophobic and racist. It makes no sense. It's all virtue signaling.
I'm done with it, dude. I'm done with it. They make you sound like I feel like I'm being condescending to you as I'm explaining it to you. Because it's such an obvious thing that you all need to speak the same language. On one hand, we're multicultural and it's good, but on the other hand, we're dominated by a dominant culture. They're playing both sides, fast and quick, fast and loose, constantly. And the fact that you had to justify that it's good to speak the same language puts you in the camp of a white nationalist is absolutely fucking insane.
Yeah, well, it's West bad, America bad, everything bad. Prop up radical Islam that literally throws gay people off of windows, off of rooftops. But of course, they'll say that's because of, because of oppression. They make excuses. They'll make excuses for every single group that they want to fetishize, and then the groups that they don't fetishize, they're held responsible for their actions. It's literally just instilling like identity-based narcissism into their favorite identity groups.
All in all, totalitarianism bad.
Yeah, can agree.